everyone. Hi, it's Aikkuli ASMR. Aikkuli. Today is time for an English speaking video. And since it's Halloween, or right about Halloween, I thought we could read some ghost stories. I have this book, Celtic Myths and Tales. I bought this in Scotland when I was there, maybe 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, but I actually haven't read this yet. But I started watching Outlander from Netflix. Outlander. And it kind of sparked the idea to start reading this Celtic book, and I think it's quite fitting for Halloween since this book has lots and lots of stories, and there is one section about ghosts. It's difficult. So I was thinking that I could read some ghost stories. Yeah, let's find the correct page. And I'm already apologize in advance for all the butchering of Celtic names that I'll be doing during this reading session. But yeah, I hope you can still understand me. Okay, let's see how many stories we will read. These are quite short, so maybe we can go through 2 or 3. Let's go. Tales of Ghosts Introduction. In Scotland, stories of ghosts and evil spirits form a rich and vibrant tradition, as alive today as it was centuries ago. It is one of the oldest genres of Scottish mythology, and certainly the most enduring, for as little is known today as it ever was about where we go when we leave this earth. Our spirits may visit the realms of heaven, but we have religion to explain that. What of that time before the soul leaves the body? And what of the body in the ground? The dank, dark earth houses many secrets, and it is there that ghosts and other spirits are bred. The newly dead and the long dead are the most frightening, for they are most venomous in their attacks on unsuspecting family or even strangers. Beware of a fleeting glimpse of something unknown. Watch out for that unexplained flash of light in a haunted house. Take note when a chair moves suddenly in an empty room. And if a body is laid out for burial in a house near to you, sleep elsewhere, for the spirits of the dead can come back in many strange forms. There's frosted air which crisped his breath and crunched under his feet. And onto his cold, dark boat he climbed, then out to sea where he settled himself under oilskins and drew out his fine fiddle and began to play. And the fiddler of Gord, as the man was called, played for hours as the fish drew closer to hear the wondrous music, catching themselves in his nets, but fighting not at all, so comforted were they by the strains from his fiddle. Then the fiddler headed homewards, his basket groaning with fresh fish, tastier for having expired happily. As he passed the grassy knoll that hid his sweet snug cottage from the fierce winds, he heard a graceful melody, and stopping in his tracks and laying down his basket, he listened. There was a light which glinted and beckoned through the grass, and he was drawn towards it as the music grew louder. A door had opened in the hill, and from inside came the enchanted music of the fairy folk, a melody so divine and simple that his heart grew larger in his breast, and he pulsed with pure pleasure. The fiddler of Gord entered the door that night, and it was shut firmly behind him. The cottage, tucked into the base of the knoll, was quiet as the night grew longer, and the fiddler had not returned. And finally, when it neared dawn, the youngest son was sent out with a lantern, and when he returned with the fiddler's basket of fish, there was no doubt in their minds that he'd been blown down the cliffs into the sea. The family lived there for many years, but the fiddler did not return. Finally, they moved from that place to another, and a new family took over the wee cozy cottage tucked into the base of the knoll, and they made a happy home there, warmed by the hearth and protected from the angry winds by the arm of the hillock. It was on one windy night, when the sky howled at the thundering clouds, that a knock was heard on the door of this warm cottage, and when the door was opened there appeared an old man, bent and cold, and he thrust his hands at the fire, laying his fiddle to one side. And as he looked around, he realized that it was not his family who gazed at him with astonishment, but another, and they wore garments which spoke of ages to come, not I think we have time to read one more story. I'll just check how long it is. Oh, it's really... Here are two really short ones, so I think we might have time for two stories. And now comes the butchering of the names. Macphail of Isinis. Okay, it's spelled Uisinnis, so I'm going to say Isinis, even if it's not right. More than 3 centuries ago, there lived a man in Isinis, and his name was Macphail. He was a big man, strong and silent, and he lived in a great stone house with his wife, his son's wife, and their daughter. Now woe had fallen upon the family some 13 years earlier, when the daughter of Macphail's son had been born dumb. Never a word had crossed the tongue of the young lass, but she was quiet and kind and well liked by all. The sad day came when old Macphail died, and his body was dressed and laid at the end of their great stone house in preparation for burial. And his son, dressed in the black of mourning, drove off that day to tend to the arrangements and gather together the old man's friends. He would be gone for a day, leaving the 3 women alone. That night, as the moon hung high in the sky, lighting the path to that great stone house and setting the rooms aglow with its beams, a scuffling was heard from the room with the body, and as the noise grew much louder, there came a shriek. And from the mouth of the dumb girl, who had never before spoken a word, came the cry, "Granny, Granny, my grandfather is up and he's coming to get you. He'll eat you, he will, but he won't touch me." And the old woman flew from her bed, and sure enough, there, striding down the hall, was the man who had laid at the end of the hall, dead and about to be buried. And she slammed the door and thrust the wardrobe against it, and the boxes and piles of mending. She screamed with fright, but the door was shut tight. Then at this the old Macphail bent down and began to dig, and he dug there for some time, his great hands heaving earth and rocks from under the door frame until a tunnel was bored straight under the door. And as he wedged his way into this space and thrust his mighty shoulders up on the other side, his face a mask of horrible pain and determination, a cock flew down from the rafters onto the floor, and there he ground 3 times and returned to his loft. And old Macphail ceased his digging then, and he fell deep into the trough he had dug, stone dead. His son returned to Isinis the following morning, and there he found a wife and a mother who could hardly utter a word, and a daughter who could not stop speaking of the ghost that had come. And thinking them all quite mad, he was stopped short in his tracks by the sight of his father, his hands torn and bloodied, half of him in a hole under his mother's door, half of him out. Old Macphail was buried the next day, but the hole he had dug beneath that doorway is still there, in the ruins of that ancient house, and there's been no one able to fill it. Macphail's pit is its name, and the spirit of that man lies with it to this day. Like a zombie story. Next difficult name, Tarpnaloid. man standing there, the sun glinting on his golden hair and lighting his clear blue eyes. He spoke to her then about the fineness of the afternoon, and she spoke back. "You must be very tired after all that washing," he said kindly, and the woman blushed, for the men of Aikkuli never cared much about women's tiredness or about the washing. "I am indeed," she stammered. "Do you mind if I join you there?" He smiled at her. "Because I am pretty tired myself." "Oh no," she said sweetly, and made room beside her. Now that fine young man sat down beside her, and he then spoke again. "Do you mind if I lay my head in your lap?" he whispered, and the woman flushed again and shook her head. And so it was that this young woman was sitting by the sunny banks of the loch, with the head of a handsome young man in her lap. And as she gazed down, hardly believing her good fortune, she noticed a cedar in his hair, and weeds, and bits of water moss, and only then did she notice his hooves, which lay crossed in slumber. The water horse. And carefully, ever so gently, the woman took from the washing bag a pair of sharp scissors, and cutting a hole in her coat where the water horse's head lay, she slipped out from under him, leaving a bit of her coat behind. And then she ran back to the village, and as the fear struck her, she shrieked to the villagers, "Help, it's the water horse." There was a neighing behind her, and the sound of hooves on gravel, and she ran all the faster, calling for help. Now the old man heard her first, and he called out to his neighbor, a man named MacLeod, whose bull was the closest. The bull was called Darpnaloid, and he was a fierce creature, all the more so for being kept inside all his life. "Let loose Darpnaloid," cried the woman, rushing into the village. "Turn him loose." And so the bull was let loose, and he threw himself at the water horse, and there ensued a fight so horrific that the villagers could hardly watch, and it carried on for hours and then days, and finally the bull beat that water horse back to the loch, and they both disappeared. The woman returned to her home, and she lay down on her bed, never to rise again. Nor did the bull or the water horse, although it is said that the horn of Darpnaloid rose to the surface of the water one fine day, many years later. It's still there, they say, guarding the path to the loch of the water horse. Alright. I think that concludes our ghost stories for tonight. I hope it wasn't too scary and you can still sleep soundly. Please leave a comment and a thumbs up if you want to hear more of these ghost stories. Yeah, thanks for joining me for this video.